important thing is the flower. Flower is playing a very important role in the sexual reproduction of the plant, right? So flowers are basically of two types. One is called as the unisexual flower and the another is called as the bisexual flower, right? Uni matlab one. What do you mean by uni? One. So when either male or female gamete is present, it is called as the unisexual flower. Okay, for example, watermelon. Watermelon की जो flower होते हैं, they are unisexual. Then papaya is also a unisexual flower. Okay, so uni मतलब one, either male gamete will be present or female gamete will be present. Bisexual flower means both the gamete will be present in the same flower. For example, China rose. China rose is a bisexual flower in which both male and female gamete are present in the same flower. Right. Now let's understand about the different parts of the flower. So we have understood about the types of the flower. Now we will understand about the different parts of the flower. So this is the typical longitudinal section of the flower. LS means what? Longitudinal section of the flower. So in a typical flower, we have this colorful part which is called as the petals. This colorful part is called as the petals. Next is the green leafy part which is called as the sepal. It is called as the sepal. Then in the center you can see this part is called as the stamen. This stamen is the male reproductive part of the plant. Okay, and it has two parts, that is filament and anther. Right, so filament is helping in the attaching of the stamen and this anther contains the male reproductive gamete which is called as the pollen grain. So if it is asked name the male reproductive part of the plant, your answer will be stamen. If the question is name the male reproductive gamete of the plant, the answer will be pollen grain. Is it clear? Then we have this center swollen part which is present in the center. It is called as the carpel or pistil. Carpel and pistil is the female reproductive part of the plant. It has three different parts, that is stigma, style and ovary. This is called as the stigma. This long tube is called as the style and this swollen part is called as the ovary. Right? In this ovary, the female gamete which is called as the ovules are present. Ovules are the female gamete which are present in the ovary. So if the question is name the female reproductive organ of the plant, answer will be pistil or carpel. If the question is name the female reproductive gamete of the flower, the answer will be ovule. Right? Is it clear? Now, next is that for sexual reproduction, the important thing which is taking place in the plant is the pollination. Now, what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of pollen grain because it is the male reproductive gamete. So, unless and until pollen grains will not be transferred, pollination cannot take place. Okay. So, pollination is done by the pollinating agents. Pollinating agents are what? The agents which are helping in the pollination. So, there are two types of the agent, biotic and abiotic. Biotic means the living agents and abiotic means the non-living agents. So, abiotic agents कौन से हो जाएंगे? Air, water and wind. Right? Because pollen grains are very light, they can be taken away by the help of wind also. And biotic components will be insects, houseflies, human beings, animals. We can also transfer the pollen grain from one place to another place. Now pollination is of two types, that is self-pollination and cross-pollination. What do you mean by self-pollination? So when the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of same flower or another flower of the same plant, it is called as self-pollination. That means that in a plant, okay, if this is a flower, if pollen grains of one flower are transferred, on the same, then it is called as the self pollination. और जरूरी नहीं है कि फ्लावर प्लांट में दूसरा भी हो सकता है, इसका पोलन ग्रेन इस फ्लावर पे जाके ट्रांसफर हो जाता है, then also it is called as the self pollination. They are the flowers of the same plant, right? They are the flowers of the same plant and this is called as the self pollination. Now in cross pollination what happens? The transfer of pollen grains to the stigma of another flower of the different plant. That means one flower is here and another flower is here. This is one plant, this is another plant. So if the pollen grain from here is transferred to the another plant flower, then it is called as the cross pollination. Is it clear to everybody? So these are the two methods of the pollination. Now what is the importance of this, significance of this pollination? So significance of pollination is that it is helping in the formation of seed and the fruit. Okay, if this pollination will not take place, then this formation of seed and fruit will not take place. Now once the pollination has occurred, now this is the ovary, carpel you can say, this is the carpel or pistil and this is the pollen grain. So pollen grain has stick on this stigma and this pollen grain has the germ cells, male germ cells. Okay, so what will happen? The stigma, from this pollen grain a pollen tube will come. Okay, pollen tube will arise through this style and this pollen tube will contain what? Germ cells, male germ cells, and these germ cells will come and fuse with the ovary and this process is called as the fertilization and the zygote is formed. Once the zygote is formed, you can see there are cells present in this ovary. Okay, so these three cells are here and two cells in the center. Center cells are called as the polar cells and the end cells they are called as the antipodal cell. So one fusion has taken place between the germ cells, another fusion will take place over here and therefore the fertilization is taking place twice and therefore this is called as the double fertilization. Okay, once the fertilization has taken place, then what will happen? This flowery world will disappear. Because what was the function of these petals? The function is to attract the insect for pollination. Okay, colorful colors, different colors. When insect they see different colors, they are attracted towards the flower and they come and sit on the flower. Once they will come and sit on the flower, the pollen grain will stick onto their body and when they will go and sit on the another flower, the pollination will take place. So after pollination, after fertilization, all these sepals, petals, they will shred off, they will disappear. Okay, they will fall. Okay, then what will happen? The fertilization has already taken place and now the ovule which is present, it will convert into the seed and the ovary will develop into a fruit. So this was all about the sexual reproduction in the plants. Okay, is it clear to everybody?
Now let's summarize by a short video.
Reproductive parts inside the flower. This is the female reproductive part of the plant. It is called pistil. It has three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. These are the male reproductive parts. It is called stamen. It has two parts: anther and filament. Do you think flowers of all plants have both the male and female parts? No. In plants like watermelon and papaya, the flowers are unisexual. That means male and female flowers are separate. Whereas in plants like hibiscus and mustard, the flowers are bisexual. That means a flower with both male and female parts. What do these reproductive parts do? They produce the reproductive cells or germ cells. Anther is the part where male reproductive cells are produced. It produces pollen grains that are yellowish in color. Each pollen grain contains two germ cells and one pollen nuclei. The ovary contains ovules. Each ovule consists of female reproductive cell or egg cell. You know that fertilization means fusion of male and female gametes. Then, how do these male and female gametes come together for fusion? For that, The male gametes should reach the female gametes. But how do the pollen grains travel from anther to stigma? They travel from anther to stigma by the help of air, water, insects, birds, and other animals. The transfer of pollen from stamen to pistil is called pollination. If it occurs in the same flower or between the flowers of same plant, it is called self-pollination. If pollination takes place between two flowers of different plants, it is called cross-pollination. The pollen grains produced by the anther are transferred to the stigma of the pistil. The pollen grain germinates and produces a long tube called pollen tube into the style to reach the ovule. The pollen nucleus and two germ cells travel through the pollen tube and fertilizes the egg. After fertilization, the zygote divides several times to form an embryo within the ovule.